Andrea Tursi grew up outside of Philadelphia in Alden, PA. She has a BA in English from Villanova University in 2002 and has submitted her capstone project, the novel, My Rookie Season, A Tale of Love and Football, which was read by Professor Kitsy Watterson and Dr. Bathsheba Ben-Amos. She began her career in the financial printing industry, but left that job to pursue writing and a degree at Penn. She now works as the web editor and assistant editor of the Penn Almanac, and just had her first article published on Penn's connection to the site of the former Philadelphia Divinity School. She's multi-talented and also works with polymer clay and will soon be selling Philly-centric line of jewelry, cheesesteak cufflinks, for example, and other things, at a boutique in Center City. I know what to get my wife for her next anniversary, I think. Not cufflinks, but something cheesesteak oriented, right? She's been living in Philadelphia for 5 years now, and the city is what inspires her writing and her clay work. Andrea is currently workshopping her novel with the Rittenhouse Writers Group and hopes to have it published someday. Tonight she'll present us excerpts from My Rookie Season. Andrea.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm short. So throughout my whole life, I've had one dream, to write a novel. I used to think that writing was a solitary endeavor, but my time at Penn has taught me that just the opposite is true. When I enrolled in the MLA program in the spring of 2006, I did so for the sole purpose of enrichment. I thought that being more educated in general would improve my writing and help me fulfill my dream in a roundabout way. I was planning on avoiding creative writing courses for the most part. Back then, the idea of sharing my work with a group of people was still too terrifying a prospect, but as you can see, I've gotten over that by now. I started the program with a course about popular culture, and I wrote a research paper on Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind, the first of many I would write on the subject in the following months and years. I wanted my capstone project to be an academic piece that would explore the ways in which the novel was an early example of feminist fiction. I planned to argue that the book introduced complicated and controversial ideas about race, sex, and the condition of women in the South that were hidden deep within the subtext. I would go on to argue that the film version, although it remains one of my favorites, misses the point of the book and in many ways contradicts it. Selznick's South was a utopia disrupted by outside forces, while Mitchell's South was in many ways a dystopia, a society crumbling from within. But don't get me started on that. The main point is that where the film becomes a love story between Scarlett and Rhett, the novel is Scarlett's story alone. I would go on to take 3 more courses in support of that project. I had gotten to know very well a certain spot on the 4th floor of Van Pelt Library where most of the books I required were housed. In 3 different semesters, I wrote 3 research papers on Gone with the Wind, adding up to 90 pages and what I considered to be a good head start on my capstone. I spent the summer reading books about the novel and about its author, and I read my well-loved, much-thumbed, been dropped in the bathtub copy of it about 1 million times. But as much as I was enjoying researching Margaret Mitchell's book, the real reason that I came to Penn was to write my own. I decided to enroll in a creative writing workshop with Professor Kitsy Watterson. It would be the first time I would ever share my writing with anybody, let alone a professor and a group of what I imagined to be intimidating Ivy League students. That class taught me that feedback and collaboration was not only helpful to the work of the writer, but also essential. It may seem obvious, but it took that writing workshop to teach me that everything, even art, takes practice. I had convinced myself that it would be wise to spend my remaining time at Penn on academic endeavors, but I also knew that the MLA program could provide the best opportunity to accomplish this goal of writing a novel. It would give me structure and deadlines and access to brilliant faculty who were always willing to guide me. Before I made up my mind, I enrolled in another class with Kitsy Watterson, Writing and Remembering, a memoir workshop. The memoir class opened new doors. Each week, that room was a safe place, a creative environment where an unbelievably diverse group of writers, old and young, were comfortable sharing some of the most intimate stories of their lives. The story I chose to write was about a broken engagement I had recently suffered. It told about the process of canceling the football-themed wedding I had planned and being abandoned by who I then considered to be the love of my life. It was the story that was closest to my heart, the one I had allowed myself to write without censorship. And an interesting thing happened when I read this story out loud in class. I found that although I had written the story with tears falling onto my computer keyboard, most of my classmates laughed out loud when I read it to them. Their reception of the story allowed me to look at it from a fresh perspective. For the first time, I was able to see the humor in my own predicament. It helped me to transform the story from one of defeat to one of triumph. After my experience in that workshop and encouragement from my classmates and Professor Watterson, I decided to abandon my beloved Gone with the Wind project. And I used my remaining year at Penn to work one-on-one with Kitty Watterson and write a novel as my capstone. Under her guidance, that first memoir piece became a fictionalized short story, and that story led to 11 more stories, and those stories eventually became this novel. Like Gone with the Wind, mine is not a love story, but rather a story about a young woman's journey of growth, healing, and self-acceptance. It is not a story about loving someone else, but about learning to love to yourself. Holding the first draft of it in my hands and seeing it become tangible was incredibly satisfying. But now that I have accomplished my goal of getting it written, I have set a new one for myself, and that is to continue to work on it, get it perfected, and eventually published. I don't know if that will ever happen, but I do know that if it did, the acknowledgments would be almost as long as the book itself. They would begin, of course, with those the book is dedicated to, my parents. And I also want to thank them for being here tonight to support me. It would include all my friends, and James Ron and the members of the Rittenhouse Writers Group, and many, many people from Penn, like Dr. Pastor, who gave me a chance in the MLA program, and the brilliant group of writers who were my fellow classmates here, and my professors. The best thing about the faculty here is that if they know a student is passionate about a project, they become excited about it too. This was true in all my classes and for both of my major projects. A living example is Dr. Bathsheba Ben-Amos, who was willing to be a reader for my capstone no matter which one I chose to complete. And of course, the acknowledgments would include Kitty Watterson, who is now both my mentor and my friend. She alone guided me through 4 of my 9 semesters here, 2 creative writing workshops and 2 independent studies, and countless, countless drafts. I could not even have attempted this project without her guidance, advice, and much needed encouragement. I would thank her for her passion, her enthusiasm, and most of all, for believing that this novel was a possibility long before I ever did. I'm just going to read some excerpts from the first chapter. The chapter is called Blindside Hit. I'm grating cheese, sliding the brick of orange cheddar along the metal grates in rhythm with the Who blasting out of the stereo speakers, while keeping one eye on the muted Super Bowl pregame show. This past football season, I've become an expert at multitasking. It distracts me from my negative thoughts. The most difficult part of grating cheese, I tell my imagined television audience, is not eating it all before you're finished. I pinch a few shreds with my fingers and let them melt in my mouth. To speak with authority is a practice I'm trying to adopt. I'm trying to develop confidence, that one thing that all successful people have in common. To make definitive statements, to speak like a man, to speak as if I have any idea what the hell I'm talking about. The art of bullshit. Ryan epitomized this. I admired that about him. In 2 hours, the New England Patriots and the New York Giants will meet in the Super Bowl. The pregame news is all about Tom Brady and how perfect he is and how he led the Patriots to an undefeated season. I think Tom Brady is just so smug with his championship rings and his Calvin Klein ads, a quarterback supermodel. You're not real, I whisper to his image on the screen as the cheese wanes down to a final chunk. You are an illusion. I want him to get his ass kicked today. I hope that everything he works for ends up meaning nothing. I hope his dream of the big day gets totally destroyed by the Giants. And that's hard for me to say, because I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I hate the fucking Giants. I'm making taco dip on the coffee table in my living room so I can avoid the tiny, critter-infested kitchen in my 1-bedroom apartment. Everyone goes crazy over this taco dip. My mother would kill me if I told my friends that it's really just salsa and cream cheese mixed together with lettuce, tomato, and cheese sprinkled on top. I know all my mother's culinary secrets. I used to be her prep chef when I was a kid, standing on the chair to reach the kitchen sink so that I could peel the carrots or snap the ends off green beans. She would stand at the stove in her heels after work, cranking out a tasty and nutritious meal every night for a soon-to-be expanding family of 4. I always thought I'd be like her someday, balancing career and family, cooking big healthy dinners instead of eating handfuls of cereal straight from the box. It's like when I was 8 or 9 and I'd watch the high school girls waiting at the trolley stop as I walked past them on my way to school. I thought that in a few years I'd be tall and confident and put together, but soon high school and college were over, and I still hadn't figured out the secret to making my hair look good. I'm 27 now and still waiting for my breasts to arrive. I braced myself before walking into the kitchen and knocking politely on the cabinet above the stove. "Scooter, are you in there?" I say out loud. "Coming in to get some salsa." I'm afraid that if I get startled by another mouse, I'll drop dead. My heart feels so weak these days that it takes me a while to recover from things like that. I don't hear any shuffling, so I open the cabinet, grab some salsa, and quickly shut the door. I use my mother's technique of opening a jar by bashing the lid with the handle of a butter knife. I miss my old technique, which involved tossing the jar to Ryan and saying, "Hey, Muscles, open this for me." I bang the knife until I hear the satisfying pop of the broken vacuum seal and pour the salsa over blocks of white cream cheese resting in a silver bowl. I mash it all together with a fork until my arms are tired and it turns the right shade of pink. I normally avoid Super Bowl parties. Usually for me, the end of football season is a sad occasion, the worst day of the year. But I have reason to celebrate today. I made it through my first football season without him, and I'm proud of myself for that. 16 games without watching a single snap together, without discussing our fantasy teams and predictions, without starting to get undressed at the 2-minute warning so that we could have sex before halftime was over. My father says that women have a tendency to turn the Super Bowl into a goddamn salad fest, and he's right. I know there will be people talking during this game at the party, people who are there to only watch the commercials, but I'm used to that by now. I couldn't keep up my Sunday ritual of watching the games in my quiet apartment where I could give them my undivided attention. It made the signs of Ryan's absence all too apparent. His empty spot on the couch, the leftover pizza fries, the game-used penalty flag missing from its place of honor on top of the TV. Instead, I spent game days at the bar with the only men who are constants in my life, my father and brother, my uncles and cousins. But even watching from there, I felt a connection to him. I didn't even know where he was living, but in those 3 hours, I knew exactly what he was doing and whether or not he had a smile on his face. I kept my eye on the scores on the bottom of the screen. This season, I was not only an Eagles fan, but a die-hard fan of whatever team happened to be playing against the St. Louis Rams. I wanted Ryan to be as miserable as I was. In fact, I feel somewhat responsible for the Rams losing their first 9 games and having the worst season in the history of their franchise. I'm sure my voodoo had something to do with it. And I'm sure that in spite of that, Ryan proudly wore his blue and gold to the bar every week and didn't miss a minute of the action. The Rams have sucked for years, but somehow he understands unconditional love when it comes to football. He understands good and bad, sickness and health, loyalty and faith. In football, he knows not to expect perfection. It was 2 years ago today that Tom Brady and the Patriots beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I was standing on the couch screaming at the television when the final seconds ticked off the clock, and it became clear that the Eagles were out of time. I remember that my tears started to fall as the blue and red ticker tape fluttered to the field, and before they presented the Lombardi Trophy, Ryan scooped me into his arms. I was beyond heartbroken and disappointed, but most of all, I felt stupid. How could I even let myself think that they were going to win? This is Philadelphia, where a major sports team hasn't won a championship in over 25 years. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like if a Philly team ever actually took one home. I couldn't picture the city going crazy, the Broad Street Parade, the banners unfurling. It was as if I believed in something that was utterly impossible, and setting yourself up like that always leads to heartbreak. "I told you not to dream it, honey," Ryan said as he wiped my tears away with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "If you don't let yourself imagine it, you can't be disappointed." My family has long stopped tiptoeing around the subject. "When are you going to get all this stuff out of my basement?" my mother asked yesterday when I went over to do some laundry and stock up on leftovers. She meant the AstroTurf tablecloths, football-shaped swizzle sticks, pennants and pom-poms, boxes of invitations that looked like game tickets, a handmade papier-mâché football sculpture, 2 cases of hollow ceramic football planners, and an inflatable goalpost that would have been the backdrop for the end zone dance contest. The trappings of a football-themed wedding that would never come to be. "Know what you can do with these?" she asked, holding aloft one of the football planners. "These would make cute containers for dip at Super Bowl parties." "The centerpieces? I have 36 of those, Mom," I told her. "I'll be 63 years old that many Super Bowls from now." I pictured myself weak and decrepit, hunched over from carrying the weight of this around with me for that many years. I feel it with me all the time already, like something heavy pressing on my shoulders. When I manage to banish it briefly from my consciousness, it manifests itself by causing an involuntary twitch in my right eye. "Have you thought about what you want to do with your dress?" she asked delicately, not wanting to set off more of the tears that seemed to always be welling up behind my eyes. The dress was the only loose end I hadn't tied up yet. I'd made calls to the photographer, florist, and bakery. I'd canceled the church, the hotel, the DJ, and the piano-playing Andy Reid impersonator. I'd even given back my engagement ring, the lovely diamond-encrusted filigree that he said was custom designed for me, even though I recognized it from ads in the bridal magazines. I had let my mother pick out my dress, and she wasn't exactly thrilled about my desire to make the wedding a tribute to the one passion that Ryan and I had in common. She kept reminding me that it would be classier if I kept the details subtle, and I tortured her by suggesting things like bursting through the double doors of the church and sprinting down the aisle with a football tucked under my arm instead of a bouquet. I glanced to the side of the room where the gown had been hung and zippered into a heavy white body bag. I didn't even remember what it looked like. "Burn it," I told her. "It's a beautiful dress, Tony. There's no reason you couldn't wear it." "I don't have a reason to wear it, Mom." "But you will," she said, sounding so sure, as if it wouldn't matter if I just put on that dress someday and walked down the aisle towards some other man. I find a neglected bag of salad in the bottom drawer of the refrigerator. I pick out the pieces of lettuce that are the least slimy and tear them into shreds. The last time I made this dip was October 13th, the day we were supposed to be married, when all my friends showed up unexpectedly. I was hoping for rain, but the weather was perfect. It was our wedding day exactly how I had pictured it in my mind. A few puffy clouds floating in a bright blue sky, the oranges and reds of the changing leaves, and that crisp chill in the air that made everything smell so clean and fresh. I planned to spend the day wallowing, but when I went outside to smoke a cigarette, an old habit I'd recently fallen back into, my friends were standing on the patio with trays of food and coolers of beer. They came despite my insistence that I would be all right by myself, and despite the money they wasted on the Eagles green bridesmaids dresses I'd forced them to buy. I spent the day drunk and distracted, my phone ringing off the hook, the mailbox stuffed with cards, my friends dancing in the living room and smoking on the porch. I know that Ryan spent the day alone. He didn't have a huge network of friends and family like I did. His mother would have been too sick to make the trip to Philly, and his brother and sister-in-law would be in Boston, packing their bags for the non-refundable Hawaiian honeymoon they bought for us. Sometimes I hate him so much I forget that his heart was broken too. I used the serrations of a plastic knife to saw into a fist-sized tomato, squishing out the seeds and goop. I cut the bright red skin into little squares to add some color to the taco dip. According to my mother, presentation accounts for half of the taste. I sling spoonfuls of the pinkish glop into the ceramic football planter and smooth it out with the back of the spoon. I cover it completely in lettuce and sprinkle it with the shreds of cheese. Then I drop the tomato squares one by one on top until the dip looks perfect. I used to make this stuff especially for Ryan. I wonder if it would break his heart to know that I'm making it for a Super Bowl party that I'm going to with a new guy I met a couple of weeks ago. I wonder how he would feel if I ended up feeling right at home with this guy's family full of Eagles fans, or if I impressed his mother with my taco dip skills, and she thought the football bowl it came in was a nice touch. Thanks for listening.